Hello, students. In this lecture, we're going to discuss the concept of scripts, which comes from psychology, and sometimes in psychology they call it other things, but our textbook refers to the concept as scripts, and also some psychologists also refer to it as scripts. So more specifically in our domain, in learning frameworks, what we're going to do is we're going to try to develop this practice of acknowledging what our current scripts are. We're going to try to maintain those scripts that are obviously productive and that actually contribute to our goals and to our dreams. But we're also going to try to rewrite those scripts that maybe aren't so productive, the ones that get us off course from what we want in life, especially in the present moment, but also what we want into the future. So one of the key traits of a successful student that we've already talked about before in this class is the concept of self-awareness. And what self-awareness is this objective awareness, you can say this objective knowledge or this objective perception of ourselves as individuals. And it involves, how we think, how we feel, and also how we behave. So when we are self-aware, we are perceptive, we are knowledgeable about our thoughts, our emotions, and also our actions or our behaviors. And also when we're self-aware, we're able to perceive our strengths as well as our weaknesses. When we're self-aware, we also know when we're on course with our goals and with our dreams, but we also know when we're off course, right? And of course, keep in mind that everyone has strengths and also everyone has weaknesses, even me, right? As amazing as I am, we all have strengths and weaknesses, and we all can be on course, but occasionally we can get off course. Everybody on the planet. But only those individuals who are self-aware are able to make that actual course correction to get back on track. And I think we've talked about this before, or hopefully you've read it in your textbook. The reason your textbook is called On Course, right, is because we always want to be on course with our goals and our objectives and our dreams in life. There's nothing wrong with making mistakes and having weaknesses and getting off course as long as we're willing to do the necessary steps to be self-aware and then take the necessary steps to get back on track. So sometimes we are totally on track with our dreams and our goals, right? And other times not so much, right? We get off track. And why is this? Well, as human beings, we have these unconscious internal forces that sometimes help us achieve our present successes, but sometimes they get in our way and they can steer us away from what we want or from what we intended. In other words, they can get us off track from our goals and our dreams. What I call, they can sabotage us, or maybe we self-sabotage ourselves. Regardless, we call these unconscious internal forces scripts. So there's that definition, scripts. So when you think of, where does this word come from? What is the origin of this psychology word called scripts? And we all know that actors and actresses have scripts. And what does a script do? Well, a script tells an actor or an actress what words to use, what emotions to feel, and what actions they should perform on the stage. And so the actor or the actress is successful when he or she, says or feels or does exactly as that script tells them to say or feel or do, right? But it doesn't work the same way for us as human beings following what we call a life script. We, as human beings, shouldn't do what actors and actresses do. We shouldn't respond automatically to our life scripts. Actually, that's a bad thing, right? Sometimes our life scripts actually do help us, but sometimes they don't help us. The bottom line, though, is that every one of us has them. I have life scripts, your other professors have life scripts, your parents have them, your classmates have them, your friends do, and you do. Okay, let's now turn our attention to what we call the anatomy of a script. So anatomy is just a fancy word for the structure or the internal workings of. So let's look at this structure that makes up a script. And a script actually has two different parts, which you can see depicted in the diagram to the side as the outer yellow part and then the inner green part. So the first part of the script contains what we call surface level directions. And these are directions, or you could say instructions, that we have for thinking, for feeling, and for behaving. So we're going to take each one of those, okay? So we're going to start with the first one. We're going to take the thinking or the thought patterns. So yes, definitely the surface level directions include our thought patterns. And these are things like the way we habitually talk to ourselves. You can call it self-talk. So you might say something like, I'm good at writing, or I'm bad at math, or I always say the wrong thing to somebody, or the way we do things is right and the way those other people over there do it is wrong, right? So it's these habitual self-talk, and it reveals thought patterns. Another level of the surface level directions includes the emotional patterns. So when we think of emotions, of course, we think of habitual feelings. We have all sorts of feelings: happiness, anger, sadness, jealousy, anxiety, and so forth. And the last part of the surface level directions include the behavioral patterns. So these are our actual behaviors, our actions, what we do. Okay, and these are habitual actions. We could say, arriving late or arriving early. It could be exercising regularly, a habitual pattern of, putting other people down, or a habitual pattern of, never putting your hand up in class, or always going to participate in activities on campus. So it is the habitual actions. So basically, when we know people well, or when people know us well, we can pretty much predict what they will say, what they'll feel, and what they'll do given any kind of a scenario, given any kind of a little case study, right? So in other words, we can recognize patterns in people and even in ourselves, okay? So those are the surface level directions. That's the first part of the script. The second part of the script, which you see in the middle, in the green, deals with much deeper, a much more, what I would say, elusive, kind of hidden part of the script. And this is in part of our unconscious mind, and it involves the core beliefs. And these are formed really early in life, and our core beliefs concern, the world, other people, and they also deal with ourselves. So there are these really big picture kind of concepts, like you might view the world as safe, or you might think of the world as dangerous. You might think of people in terms of, all people can be trusted or people can't be trusted. You might think of yourself as valuable or worthy. You might think of yourself as not valuable, not worthy, right? Now, we are seldom aware of these core beliefs, but they're always there, and they're always dictating, again, what we think and what we feel and how we behave. So these beliefs, these core beliefs, actually become like they're lenses, they're like glasses, and they influence how we see everything. They influence how we see the world and situations and people and even ourselves. And because of that, they actually dictate the choices and the decisions that we make.